Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night, it is your boy, the Horrorlander, and welcome to my very first reading wrap-up that I've officially done on this YouTube channel since, its conception, which was, more than 3 years ago. I don't know why I never do reading wrap-ups. I guess they just never pique my interest, but I kind of made it like a New Year's resolution for me to start reading more. It's always been my goal to try to get through as many different horror books that I can, whether it be kids horror, young adult horror, adult horror. So just not really keeping any specific numbers in mind, just trying to read more in general. So I thought I might as well do some reading wrap-ups. I have a Goodreads account that I can link in the comments down below, in a pinned comment, that if you are interested in keeping up to date as I am reading through and logging stuff, you can follow me on Goodreads if you have an account. But otherwise, I'm going to plan on doing reading wrap-ups pretty much every month. And these are not going to replace reviews or anything. Like any books that I cover in this video, if they've not had reviews on them, it doesn't exclude them from getting reviews. I will probably make separate reviews most likely or use them all in videos. But it's more so just to give you guys updates, kind of keep track, give brief thoughts while they're more fresh in my head before rereads. Yeah, so far I'm going to be doing the month of January and the month of February. Obviously, we're a week into March. So I'm going to be bundling up those 2 months from the beginning of 2026 together. And then when it comes to the end of March or the first week of the next month, I will do a March reading wrap up. So far, 30 books this year up until the end of February is pretty good for me, all things considered. And so far, this first week of March, I have 4 books down as of today. So 34 in 2026 thus far, which I think is good. So I have a list of all the books on the side of me on a monitor, so I'm just going to keep looking back. So if you see me glance over there, that's why. So the first book that I read this year was Eek, Nightmare in the Backyard by Jeff Strand. This one's essentially about a group of girls who I think one of the main character's cousin, who's this very pretentious girl, ends up coming over to their house, and they're having this overnight backyard camping kind of thing where they set up a tent and they're resting back there and trying to have fun. And they slowly realize that there might be something outside of the tent, something trying to get in, and then they get into a lot of trouble when there are these humongous, numerous tentacles that start ripping out of the ground and trying to grab them and potentially bring them to the source, which could be quite horrific. So that's essentially the plot of that one. But this one was a bad book. I did not like this. This was bad because literally the entire book is so much useless, pointless yap. The characters just keep yapping. A lot of their personalities are like caricatures of kids. They don't even feel like realistic kid dialogue or anything, or even charming in that regard. And the action sequences you do get are very repetitive and monotonous, and the way that it wraps up in the climax and ending made very little sense and was just really goofy and random. So yeah, not a good book. The next one that I read was Skin Medicine by Tim Curran. This was the last Tim Curran story that I kind of had my eyes on that I really wanted to get to and read. So by this point, I had read all the Tim Curran short stories, novellas, and books that I had my eyes on that I was like, yeah, you definitely have to read. I still have several left, but they don't really pique my attention too much. I'll get to them when I get to them. Skin Medicine, essentially, is a Wild West story about a bounty hunter who's hunting down a serial killer that has taken the lives of many different prostitutes in different mining towns. And you get introduced to some characters like sheriffs that he has a history with and other things. And he has to potentially go up against some supernatural threats, potentially cowboy, werewolf, skinwalkers. That's right, werewolves, skinwalkers that are in cowboy outfits with revolvers, using their teeth, claws, brute power, ripping apart people, carnage, and at the same time gunslinging. So pretty fun one. It is dragged on. There's a lot of points where I just felt like, okay, kind of get to the point. It gets a little bit all over the place. The main juicy stuff involving the occult, supernatural, really only gets teased in the beginning part and then brought back at the end. So it was a decent book. It could have been better, but I still had fun with it. I mean, cowboy werewolves, what more could he ask for, right? Especially with Tim Curran, who has a great way of just having awesome action sequences and very horrific action and very horrific moments. He's the master of creature, feature, and monsters. So they always bring that aura and threat. The next book I read, the third one, was an Are You Afraid of the Dark book, back from, I think, the 90s when they came out. This was Are You Afraid of the Dark? The Tale of the Souvenir Shop. Now, looking at the cover of this book is really wild. This is one that I was like, yeah, I definitely have to get to reading this. This one was essentially about a pair of siblings who are taking like a road trip across the desert, and they have to take a pit stop, and they pit stop at this small little kind of, not really town, but a couple buildings, outpost that is by this volcano that you can go inside and tour the caverns, which the parents have interest in because they're very outdoorsy and they like hiking. Meanwhile, the main character is more so into like coming up with stories and, you know, imaginative, and the little girl is just doing whatever goes with the flow. And they decide, okay, if the parents want to go inside the volcano cavern, let them, you know, we'll go into the souvenir shop. And they may find out that the souvenir shop owner has different plans. Maybe it involves trapping them within a giant snow globe that he constructs. Because they're going to be toys for a family, a race of ancient giants that live inside of the volcano and have a civilization and government and economy, and apparently have to demand human sacrifice to maintain their socioeconomic prosperity inside of the volcano, because they live underground. This is a what the fuck book. I mean, this one was okay. I give it like a okay or like a meh, maybe even a kind of bad. It was just random and weird, and I don't know what the hell the author or writer was thinking. It's just an all over the place story, and what you think would be something that gives you reminders of like the Haunted Mask with the shopkeeper or something like that. No, it just ends up being a really, really weird story about giants inside of a volcano and being inside of, you know, gigantic houses and all this weird stuff. It's too weird for me. So that one was like okay, meh, you know. The fourth book was that I read was Some Will Not Sleep by Adam Neville. This was my first Adam Neville book I read. I heard that he's like the Stephen King in Britain, over in the UK. So Some Will Not Sleep is a short story collection that the cover really intrigued me because it's a really creepy looking cover. And, you know, this one I thought was a decent short story collection. Half of the stories are like a little too weird for me. Like they're a little too weird. It's kind of hard to keep track sometimes of what's going on in them. And just, you know, they all, sometimes a lot of them feel like, you know, Courage the Cowardly Dog episodes, but without the charm or fun. It's just more so like those, you know, weird out of nowhere type of stories. But there was some good ones in here. I think the first story is my favorite, just called When the Angels Come In, about a group of boys, middle school boys, who are going up to this old Victorian house that's abandoned and tucked away inside of the forest on a hill. And when they get in there, they find out that it's a madhouse of horrors. There are all types of freaky deaky crazy things inside of there, and it gets quite dark and sinister. There's also like a Wild West story about a gunslinging cowboy who's on a mission for revenge against an undead cult, who the reverend leader ended up going inside of a forbidden cave that the Native Americans said don't go into because it was like a portal to hell, and he ended up finding some demons and worshiping them, and creating a cult off of it. And the main character's sister and mother ended up getting taken into the cult while he was out fighting and doing stuff. So he has to get back and get his revenge. So that's also a really good story. And then there's one called The Original Occupant, which is about this guy who his boss at his workplace is going to be going on a vacation out into like the middle of the woods in some country in Europe. And he keeps getting like Lovecraftian style letters from him telling him like updates about what's going on. And they keep progressively getting creepier and creepier as he starts finding weird occult symbols and stuff out in the woods by these towns. And maybe the people around there are afraid and worship some primeval forest-dwelling creatures that may be the original occupants of those woods. And they don't like trespassers or new tenants. Leave it at that. So that was a decent collection. The next one I read was a Bone Chillers book, Bone Chillers Scare Bear. This is a really wild one. This one is about a kid who is kind of down in the dumps. He's not that popular at school. Kids make fun of him. There's a girl that he really likes that doesn't like him back and is actually dating his enemy. Take a shot if that trope has been done before. But, he's not doing well in school and he wants to grow up. He's sick of feeling like he's a little kid. So he decides to throw out a lot of his junk and memorabilia in his room. And he tries to throw away one of the old teddy bears that he's had. But he finds out that maybe the teddy bear is telepathic and speaking through telepathy to him. And the teddy bear starts giving him advice on stuff that he can do to become more popular, gain an advantage over other people at school and kind of work his way up the social ladder. And then he starts getting some hints that maybe the teddy bear might be alive and might be moving around and doing and tampering stuff to help out its owner. So this one had a cool concept. The teddy bear is quite threatening, quite scary. Reminds me of a Tales from the Dark Side episode called Ursa Minor. But there are cringy scenes in here, like the teddy bear teaching the kid how to dance because he has to go and bust out his dance moves at the local dance, and it's like going step by step on how bro is dancing and the music he's playing and the rhythm he's catching. It's like that shit is straight cringe. Also, it's pretty vague on the capabilities of this bear. This bear goes from like a creepy object manipulating the main character to all of a sudden getting all these crazy weird powers out of nowhere. So that one is still higher decent. I still liked it. I still enjoyed it. Even pretty good. Honestly, it's a pretty fun time, but nothing really super advocate for, I should say. But nonetheless, it's still a fun book. The next book I read after that is Goosebumps Slappy World, Monster Blood is Back. This is the last Monster Blood book I had to read, which is why I made that ranking video about all the Monster Blood stories. So Monster Blood is back. I thought it was decent. This is a decent book. I liked it for the most part. I thought it was relatively pretty fun. It's about basically some kids who the main character is into cooking. Her and her best friend like cooking. They want to go on this like Food Network type of show to compete and become like master chefs or whatever, and win some prize money. I think it's like $10,000. Which $10,000 nowadays, that you're a cheap Stein. $10,000 nowadays is still good money, but like for an award show, you know what I mean? For like a big game show or award show or whatever, whatever you call it, that's like a small prize. But nonetheless, the kids want to go ahead and participate in there. The main character essentially ends up getting a can of Monster Blood at this freaky, scary toy shop that's nearby the Food Network place where they're doing rehearsals and auditions and filming the show. And, maybe it turns out that Monster Blood gets left in that studio and starts causing problems. This story was decent for the most part because you would think that the Monster Blood and the cooking show are integrated together. Like, maybe the Monster Blood, ends up in the food or it's being used as part of the gimmick of the whole cooking show. Not really. They're like two separate storylines that are like coexisting. It's like the Food Network game show is its own thing, and then the Monster Blood is its own thing. So I didn't really feel like they meshed together how it was supposed to or how you would think. The climax is really good. I really like the climax and all the action that happens involving the Monster Blood. Some of my favorite stuff involving Monster Blood. But the last chapter sucks dick. The last chapter is horrible. The last chapter is shit because and I can't say why, but it's a shit chapter because it makes you wonder why I even read this book. And low-key, the ending to the book was teased a couple chapters before the last chapter, and I was like, Stein, don't do it. And then he faked out, and I was like, okay, he's not doing it. And then he said, psych, it's happening. And I said, fuck you. But still a decent book nonetheless. Next one after that is actually a sleeper hit, one of my favorite kids' horror books I read, which is Dead Time Stories, Grandpa's Movie Monsters. This one's about a family who's at a farmhouse. They have like a large extended family, a lot of backwoods hillbilly folks in there. And I think the kids end up finding in the attic some homemade movies involving like their grandparents and stuff when they were younger and their uncles. And they find out that maybe these guys had ended up discovering a type of strange, very fun, very eerie kind of monster that ended up getting out of control and started eating a lot of things, maybe eating and attacking people, maybe eating and attacking livestock. And they've had some hints about the family members trying to keep hush-hush about maybe something being kept inside of like a barn. And yeah, then they have to eventually uncover the mystery behind what this creature is, what type of dark secrets that the family has been holding, and then getting into a lot of crazy fun action. And this one felt the most like a Stephen King story back from when he was writing in the 80s and 90s, Night Shift. It feels like a very old Stephen King type of short story made into a kid's horror book, even down to the way that it ends. And I really liked it, man. This is a great book. You have to read it, and I have to do a reread for a thorough kind of discussion of the plot, but trust me, it's a really fun time. The monster is super fun, super cool. It's definitely a Stephen King weird type of monster. And the way that they uncover the secrets, some of the dark implications, great stuff. And that ending rocks, I'm not going to lie. Next one I read was Dead Man's Crossing by Joe R. Lansdale. This one I made a video on. Essentially, he has a fictional character called Jebediah Mercer, who is a gunslinging reverend in the Wild West who acts as an exorcist. He exorcises demons, monsters, whatever that are roaming the Wild West because God put him on a mission to essentially use his different occult knowledge and biblical knowledge to take down these things. And you encounter various different people who have run-ins with these monsters and demons, and he has to help them out and try to take them down, oftentimes with gunslinging action, occult rituals and stuff. So they're quite fun, and they're good creature features because he literally deals with, conquistador werewolves that can move through shadows, turn into like shadow liquid and attack you that way. Demons that are like rotting zombie men with, beehives inside of their chest, and angry bees come out as like familiars. Wendigos made out of snow and ice that, have like human souls running around their eyeballs like moths, like all types of crazy stuff. So that one is a good book. It's a good short story collection. It's like 4 short stories that are featured in that one, and it's definitely a fun time. But if you want further thoughts, you can go check out my video on that. The next book I read is Eek Finders Keepers, is the most recent one from the Eek series by Jeff Strand. This kid's horror book is about a group of friends who are participating in this scavenger hunt that has entered and traveled into their town, their suburb neighborhood, hosted by a rich millionaire guy who's willing to give away a lot of money. And the way the scavenger hunt works is strange. There's like security around the perimeter of a park. Parents are not allowed to contact at all their kids while they're participating in the scavenger hunt. And instead of getting a list, you have to receive the items you get in an envelope and then bring it back to the main guy, and then he will then give you the next item to do. And as they're playing this game, the objects from the scavenger hunt keep getting crazier and crazier and darker and darker. And when they keep going back to the guy who's running the scavenger hunt, he may be risking their lives, trying to harm them, trying to kill them, maybe do some sinister things. So it's a whole pretty freaky story like that. The main villain feels like the main villain. The main villain of this book feels like the main villain from the movie Bingo Hell. If you've ever seen that horror movie, I think it was like an Amazon original thing. He feels like the villain from Bingo Hell. So yeah, this was a fun book. It was a good book. It had its problems, but it was still a fun time. Just felt like some things were kind of underutilized and, your typical Jeff Strand yap and caricature stuff. But again, I made a video review on that, so deeper thoughts are there. Next one I read was Dead Planet, Unhallowed Stars by Tim Curran. This was essentially a short story collection and a little pamphlet. So Tim Curran's, one of his most famous short story collections is called Alien Horrors. And a lot of the stories, several of them from the Alien Horrors book, were reprinted. They were originally printed back in the early 2000s in a small press magazine called Burning Sky. And he used to have his stories published in Burning Sky. So a lot of those stories, majority of them, ended up getting reprinted into Alien Horrors. But this little pamphlet, Dead Planet, Unhallowed Stars, actually came way before Alien Horrors. It was, I think Dark Tree Press sent this out. So these stories were in this pamphlet in a limited release way before Alien Horrors came out in the modern age. And 2 stories from Burning Sky were never reprinted into Alien Horrors. And one of those stories was featured in this pamphlet. So that was Chill Factor. Chill Factor is essentially about a group of space voyagers on this frozen tundra planet where there's always blizzards and storms going on, sub-zero icy temperatures. And there is these 2 blood red, like straight blood red giant moons which orbit the planet, that the stormy skies basically cover up with clouds. But anytime the clouds get peeled back and any human looks at these moons, they'll go insane. They like lose their mind, and it's similar to like hypothermia, where they'll start thinking that they're hot and they start ripping off their gear and pulling off their visors and instantly die and freeze on the planet. So there's like automatic blinders that are put on your visor that happen anytime the clouds part. So pretty cool setting. But there's an urban legend that there's a vampiric kind of entity which is responsible for a lot of missing people and voyagers that have been on this planet, draining their bodies, and maybe lives out in some abandoned ruins on the planet. So unfortunately, a character has to decide to investigate the mystery instead of staying the fuck away, and he ends up bringing that creature onto these guys. This one was an okay story. I like the setting. I like the blood red moon stuff. I like the idea of a vampiric entity on there, but you never get to see the monster. It's never revealed. It's never shown, just teased silhouettes and, you know, some creepy scenes involving it. And then the way the story ends is like one of the guys comes back to base and he's like, hey, you know, you're the guy who's at the base greets him and whatever. And then he gets a call that's saying like, you know, like, how are you, the guy is like back at the place where they got attacked by the thing. And he's like, how are you talking to him? Because his dead, drained body is right here next to me. He's been drained of all of his blood. He's just a husk. So who are you talking to? And you find out it's probably some shapeshifter power of the entity. So yeah, that's kind of the more so type of ending that it goes with. So this was an okay story, but yeah, it was cool nonetheless being able to read a non-reprinted Tim Curran horror short story. He's got plenty of them. I've read several of them so far this year, which is not counted towards this, and I actually have one on the way that I think is supposed to arrive today, fingers crossed. So yeah. Next one is Are You Afraid of the Dark? The Sinister Sisters. This is the second Are You Afraid of the Dark graphic novel that I read. It was okay. A lot of these graphic novels with Are You Afraid of the Dark have the same problem, where it's a lot of cringy dialogue, cringy scenes. It's a lot of self-inserts by the authors, modern writing. And they don't feel like Are You Afraid of the Dark. Both of the books feature like, the first one was Hispanic kind of urban legends and vibes, and this one is more so Ghana, African urban legends and vibes, which is cool. You can like throw in maybe like one or two of those type of stories into Are You Afraid of the Dark. But Are You Afraid of the Dark is anthology with no real theme. It's just supposed to be kind of submitted stories that go in there. So when you're just doing like culture of the week, you know, and just having all the stories based around different, you know, cultures that you select in urban legends, it doesn't feel like Are You Afraid of the Dark at all. But there was one story in there, I think, called The Tale of the Spirit Drum, about a kid who gets this like bongo drum from his grandma that, you know, if you bang on it and play it, you can make your wishes come true. There are like these indigenous tribal spirits that come out and grant your wish, but you're not supposed to do it after like midnight. And it's be careful what you wish for kind of thing with the dark ending. So I did like that one, but overall the book was okay. And the artwork is whatever. These books don't have great artwork at all. Next one was my first Spooksville book, Creature in the Teacher. You have Goosebumps, Creature Teacher, you have Bone Chiller Substitute, Teacher Creature, and you have Spine Tingler Substitute Creature, and now you got Creature in the Teacher. They just love these title riffs. This one, Spooksville, these books follow the same group of characters, which I kind of expected. I knew that going into it, but I was just like, I'm just going to read all over the place because I don't own all the books, so I can't read them all in order or have access to all the books to read in order. So hearing these kids constantly brag about all the different shit that they've done in previous books, every other page was getting annoying, I'm not gonna lie, because they have to keep bringing it up all the time, which is kind of obnoxious. But Creature and the Teacher, they have this weird biology teacher who comes in, who they suspect might be an alien, and you get some extraterrestrial action where they board the spaceship. And it gets weird. There's like, they get to Africa and there's like lions which board the ship, and now there's like lions and aliens, and yeah, it was okay. I didn't think too highly of this book. It was decent, you know, low decent. That constant repeating from the characters of all their previous feats did kind of get annoying, but nonetheless, you know, it was still fine for what it was. Next one is The Last Horror Hero by Robert Piatone. Last Horror Hero is essentially a young adult book that he did, which feels kind of like a mix of young adult and kids horror. It's about this kid, high schooler, who's really into comic books, and he's also really into pulp fiction, like pulp fiction writing, like what, Robert E. Howard used to do back in the day. And he works at his local bookstore, who the bookstore owner, man, has this like plug that gives him these super rare books and manuscripts and first editions and stuff. And there ends up being this first edition of his favorite pulp fiction author, of a never released book, one that was basically almost like an urban legend for most of the time, that comes in. And his employer gives him the option, like, okay, you can bring this home and decipher it and let me know if it's real. And he brings it home, he starts reading it, and he starts noticing that, sometimes the pictures in the books are like moving. There might be some life to it. And he ends up going to bed thinking about the book. And when he falls asleep, he ends up getting isekai, transported over to this pulp fiction world with his favorite pulp fiction hero. And he has to embark on the adventure and get into some stuff with that. I love the concept of the book. It's a really fun concept. Execution is a little it's a little all over the place. There's a little too much meta references going on. I mean, you can expect meta stuff, but it gets a little bit too geeked up and in detail at times. But the concept is really good. So I feel like if you were to adapt this, you could rewrite some stuff for like a movie and make it into like a really good story. I wish there was more horror and action focus also. There's more so some slice of life and jumping all over the place, isekai kind of stuff in there. So yeah, wasn't too big a fan of that. Next one was my first Shadow Zone book, The Undead Express. This one is a kid's horror book about a kid, I think in like a downtown New York City or something. And he ends up taking the public transportation train between his parents because his parents are divorced. So his dad is on a lower socioeconomic status on one side of the New York City, and then his mom is in the more rich part. And as he's taking this train, he ends up running into this strange train cart, which may have vampires on it. And the vampires may be using this train station to grab onto victims, lure in victims, and trying to get to the surface world. And this kid ends up getting roped into that. So this was a pretty fun story. Again, a high decent, maybe pretty good. There's some intense scenes towards the end with the climax and a speeding train full of vampires that they have to stop. And a decently fun concept. So yeah, it wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but I still think this one was a fun time. Next one is Zombie Town by R.L. Stine. Zombie Town by R.L. Stine is one of his novellas, which is basically like an unofficial Goosebumps story. This one's about a kid who's really scared of like monster and horror stuff, and he's really scared of zombies, and his best friend wants to take him to the movie theater to see a brand new zombie movie that's coming out. And when they get there, they might realize that the zombies from the movie have come out from the big screen into reality and start rampaging across the suburb. And I love this novella. It is horrific. There are so many horrific body horror and visceral horror monster moments in here with the zombies. The zombies' looks are horrific, really disgusting, really gory, really bloody. And I loved every bit of it. And there's some really disturbing dark scenes in there with that fun, kind of movie aspect of a movie coming to life. So this was a great one. I really, really enjoyed this novella. Next one is Goosebumps Slappy World Diary of a Dummy. This one was okay. It's kind of all over the place, like some kids who with their dad end up finding their dad works at like as a garbage collector, and he goes to a landfill. They find Slappy in there and bring it home, and there causes some problems. And then they find that Slappy left behind a diary which says that there might be some gold that they can find because Slappy's looking for the gold, and the kids can potentially find this gold and get the money and bring it to their dad and bring them up to a better standard of living. It's all over the place. And then they go to a haunted house where a bunch of crazy shit's happening, and then you get a plot twist as to what the gold is. But, before you get that plot twist, the idea of Slappy wanting gold is just really stupid. There's a lot of random things that happen, and while the twist reveal is cool, the way that it's done is also just kind of It leads more questions and rabbit holes than actual satisfaction. So that's that. Next one was The Long Black Coffin by Tim Curran. The Long Black Coffin by Tim Curran is a book essentially about a coming-of-age story between two college-age kids, and the main character has a best friend who's kind of down on his luck. His mother's kind of crazy and driven to the brink of depression because his father, her husband, was a war veteran who kind of went crazy and ended up actually killing himself, shooting himself inside of his old Cadillac car or whatever he has. GTO or whatever, and it gets labeled as the Black Coffin because it's where he committed suicide in. And eventually, after you find out some of the coming of age stuff, some of the weird characters in the town, the main character's best friend ends up asphyxiating, suffocating inside of that same car, and it seems to be ruled as a suicide, but he suspects there might be some supernatural aspects to it, and there might be the spirit of a very sadistic teenage girl inside of that car that has some mystery that ties to the best friend's family, the father, the mother, and some urban legend, folklore stuff involving the town. So pretty much a poltergeist story. The main character has to find a way to solve the mystery and exorcise the threat. And even though the car is the main focus on the cover and stuff, it's more so a poltergeist story. The car really comes in a few scenes and then comes at the end. The ending climax scene involving exorcising the poltergeist and destroying the car in a garage with some help is really cool and really fun and a lot of awesome visuals. So this one was a good book. This one felt like a complete story. Not my favorite in terms of Tim Curran stuff, just because I didn't feel like it was super action-packed or had a lot of great scenes in there. And there is some disturbing sexual, sadistic stuff in here that can be squeamish to some people. But it did feel like the most complete story, start to finish, that got executed. So I had to give it a good score for that. Next one is Goosebumps Triple Header 2. This was a good book. Ghoul School is about this kid who's in a school that may be infested by monsters, and his parents don't believe him, so he has to find out a way to get out of the school, maybe try to trick the kids that he's a monster. And there's some awesome transformation sequences in that. There's a story called The Revenge about a girl who uses astral projection to get revenge on a bully, which is a pretty fun, cool concept, especially during that time, especially for kids' horror too. And then there's a decent mummy story, which had some good scenes, but a lot of fake out stuff happens in that. But overall, this was a good book. And it felt very much like a creep show anthology movie where, the lefty righty Slim, the character who's introducing the stories, kind of plays like a crypt keeper creep role, going segment to segment. So I like that as well. Next one is Bumps in the Night, Clowning Around. I have a whole review for this video, but essentially about a kid who ends up getting left behind as his mom gets a book deal and has to go to New York City, and he's stuck in this kind of small town suburb where a carnival and circus is on its way, and he's in the apartment with a deadbeat boyfriend who may have some sinister intentions and plans that might get their family into trouble, and he ends up having to run away, and he ends up getting caught by a bunch of occult clowns with supernatural abilities, powers, crazy stuff going on at the carnival, and a potential demon that's running the carnival. And he has to find a way to deal with some body horror transformation, some entity inside of him, and this occult crazy circus carnival. So yeah, really fun, great story. Felt like Tales from the Crypt or EC Comics combines with kids horror. So pretty unique and novel in that regard. Next one is Monster Street Camp of No Return. This is like I have one book left, Carnival, so I decided to read this just to kind of approach towards the end of Monster Street's 4-book run. This one is pretty generic, stereotypical about a kid's going to a camp. The camp might be haunted, kids are going missing, and the camp counselors are acting like nothing's happened. And then there's something across the lake, hidden by fog, that they're not supposed to go out to, like a cavern. And then eventually they have to start investigating the mystery and try to get out of there. And there's a reveal as to what might actually be going on at the camp. This was very stereotypical. It felt like all the Goosebumps camp tropes rolled into one, very safe, nothing out of the blue extra added to the book to add that spice or pizzazz. And by the end, it just felt like, again, another typical Goosebumps twist. With some decent scenes, but this one felt super just okay. So safe and very, very, very tropey. Just filled with all the Goosebumps tropes and stuff. So Nightmare on Nightmare Street by R.L. Stine. Next book, not talking about this one. I made a whole review rant. This is the worst kids horror book I ever read. A plotless thing that just has a bunch of random crap happening every other page. Kid moves into a new house with his family on a place called Nightmare Street. It gets into some nightmare dream sequences. You don't know what's real, what's not. Random shit happening every other page. Weird stuff. And then a recontextualization at the end, which made barely any fucking sense. So that's that. Next were 3 novels that I read. These 3 novels was in a bundle collection of the author, but they are three separate novels that you can buy individually. So there are three books that are added to my thing. It's by Hunter Shaw, who's a popular creature feature guy. I've read Tim Curran and Steve Alton's stuff. Those are like the two big guys. But these other two that I read, because there's another book coming, is Hunter Shaw and Michael Cole. So I decided to get into Hunter Shaw. And these ones feel very much like EC Comics creep show kind of stories, because they're all based on people ordering stuff off the back of comic book ads and crazy stuff happening from then on. First one was Just Add Water by Hunter Shaw. Just Add Water was about a group of kids who buy some like sea monkey ripoff off the back of a comic book ad called Amazing Sea Serpents, and they try growing them in a fish tank, and it turns out to what feels like to be a dud, so they end up throwing them down the sewer, and those things actually start rapidly growing and mutating and turning into some wild monsters that start going on a bloody carnage across the town, killing and eating people, and the kids have to find out a way to save the day, which may involve going to a sushi restaurant and asking the Japanese owner if he knows anything about this back of the box that they ordered, because it's in Japanese. And maybe these things are part of a Japanese urban legend, some creatures that terrorized a prefecture around Hiroshima. And now this toy company is apparently selling them to kids in the US. And they have to find a way to stop them, which may involve wasabi and firepower. Yeah, that was a fun one. Good story. Next one's even better. Very good story. Optical Delusion by Hunter Shaw. It's about a dad whose kid, his son, orders these pair of x-ray glasses off the back of a comic book ad. And when the dad ends up putting them on, he thinks that this is just stupid, a waste of money. But then he ends up being able to see under women's clothing and see through, thin objects and stuff. So it freaks him out. And he notices that each time he keeps taking off the glasses, they feel like they're getting tighter and tighter, stuck to his skin. And the more and more he puts them on, the deeper he's able to look with the x-ray glasses. And he gets addicted because he's able to win and cheat in gambling and look at women and be perverted and all these things. But eventually they end up getting stuck to his face. He can't take them off without ripping his face off. And the glasses start showing him people's internal organs, their skeletons. He starts freaking out and going crazy. And then maybe he's able to see people's sins in very horrific manners. And it's too far too late by that point. So yeah, 8.5 out of 10, very good. And then Money Back Guarantee is about a mother who orders this nuclear submarine thing off the back of a comic book ad for her son, because she's been doing well financially for their family, and her husband and her decide to get it for him. It ends up being a cardboard piece of junk, but he ends up taking it to his friend's house next door and almost drowning in a pool with it, which makes her very angry that the company ripped her off with money and also almost killed her kid. So she tries filing complaints and trying to sue them and get back revenge for her kid. But they find out that maybe this toy company is more than it seems, and it might be a Halloween 3 Season of the Witch scenario where there's some occult stuff going on and some crazy coworkers who are willing to hunt down and stalk her family and maybe kidnap her husband and son, and she has to go to their location to take down all the people and save her family. So pretty wild story. Next one is Creature of Lake Shadow by Michael Cole. This one is about some bank robbers who bank heist goes wrong, and their getaway driver has a plan to take them out to this remote cabin out in the woods by a place called Lake Shadow, frozen over lake during this icy winter when there's blizzards and stuff and the roads are getting piled up. So they think this might be a way to clear up some of the heat, escape away from the police. But there are police and detectives going after them because there was some accidental homicides that happened at the bank. And there's an urban legend about this Lake Shadow and nearby woods that a meteor from space had crashed down, and there might be something wandering the woods from it. And a lot of people have gone missing, and the lake is taboo, so a lot of local people in the woods stay far, far away from it. But these guys are unknowingly getting brought there, and they may have to deal with not only the cops and people hunting them having to reap the repercussions of what they've done in terms of their criminal record and being, hot on the block, but at the same time, dealing with this monster and occult threat from outer space with the healing factor, acidic spit, and a lot of other crazy stuff that happens. This was a good read. It was a very fun read. A lot of good horror action, creature feature stuff. This guy is almost just as good as Tim Curran. Him and Tim Curran on like the same level of horror action, cinematic movie level stuff. Really, really good descriptions and stuff. So yeah, this is a good book. Next one is Goosebumps Most Wanted, The Haunter. This was a disappointing book. This one's about some kids in a classroom who would never be friends together, but they end up getting chosen together for a group project. And the main character is scared of ghosts, scared of horror, scared of Halloween, and they end up getting assigned to go out to a haunted house during Halloween that is part of their local neighborhood. And there's an urban legend that there was a boy in there who got struck by lightning and got burned to ashes, and even his ashes got burned, and he haunts that house. So they have to get in there with ghost reader equipment, try to find the ghost and stuff, camp out there for a night. But potentially the urban legend might be real. And there might be a ghost that ends up coming back and taking possession of his body and causing problems, which is a really cool concept. But the second half of the book gets into a lot of goofy shenanigans and pranks and really stupid stuff. Completely different tonal change to what the first part of the book was. And it gets into a lot of cringy stuff, which brought the book down in score. But yeah, that one was a letdown. Next one are two short stories that were independently published on part of like Amazon's Kindle thing, which is both by Joe Hill. First one is Jackknife by Joe Hill, which is about a college professor who gets into a cheating scandal with one of his students, so his wife divorces him. He ends up losing his job and getting repercussions. So he ends up renting out an Airbnb in the middle of the woods to try to escape the public, try to reconvene his thoughts. But he ends up taking a hike in the woods one time on the trail and ends up finding this really creepy, withered-looking sycamore tree, which has a unique jackknife stuck inside of it with some like church figures and Jesus and Boy Scouts on it. And there's like some carvings on it hinting that people were here before. It's like cryptic sayings that like we kept it in place with this. It took this guy, this guy. And when he removes the cool jackknife and takes it home, he realizes that this sycamore tree might be periodically moving night by night closer to his house and potentially is killing nearby cats and even killing people who wander on this trail at night at the wrong time, taking their blood as a form of sacrifice. And he has to basically find a way to solve the situation, but his past and his actions end up catching up to him for a pretty crazy and brutal climax and ending. So that was a good one. And Ushers is also a really unique story about these group of detectives who's interviewing this kid who suspiciously, this college-age kid has been at the site of many accidents like train crashes, school shootings and stuff. But all the people die, but he's at every scene and he always ends up being okay. So they kind of try to figure out like what's up with this kid. Does he have a tie to all these calamities and natural disasters or, freak accidents or stuff that happens? And they find out that maybe he has some type of extra sense that lets him know that he should stay away from certain places, maybe warning certain people. And after they chalk it up to being coincidence, after another chance encounter at a diner with the detective meeting that kid on off hours, he ends up having a conversation with them again, and the kid might reveal that he might have been lying about something. It's not just coincidence. There might be some entities that he's able to perceive, and they might be responsible for these accidents and stuff happening. And it turns into a very bittersweet, haunting, creepy climax and ending. So that was a good one. Second to last one I read was Frightland, Bones at the Bottom of the Lake. This is the first Frightland book that I read. This one was okay. It's about this family who goes to this camping trip out in the woods at a cabin lodge, and the kids end up finding bones and hair in the lake that they're fishing at and doing canoeing and activities. And there might be some women in white clothing and gowns who appear at night and disappear and walk into the woods. So there might be some ghost paranormal activity happening and an urban legend involving a cabin that's stuck out in the woods by their campsite. And yeah, there's a creepy visual towards the climax, but overall it wasn't that impressive. It's a lot of mundane, not really much happening, just a lot of investigating and stuff. So it wasn't really that worth of a story. Kind of disappointing overall. And finally is The Squirming by Jack Hamlin. Now, Jack Hamlin is a pseudonym for Tim Curran. He wrote several books under pseudonyms. So The Squirming is one of them. And this story is basically about like a zombie apocalypse, but it's not really zombies. It's these parasitic slugs and worms that have a symbiotic relationship that they enter inside of your body and release this heroin-like effect to your brain and make you into like a mindless zombie slave that's cannibalistic and eats other people to provide them sustenance. It's like thousands of worms infesting inside of their skulls and these like placenta sacs on their sides that they nurse with these mutant worms. that metamorphosize. These worms can eventually, after enough nutrients, metamorphosize into meter-long, scarlet red centipedes with tentacle legs and, 6 gelid black marble eyes and mouths with can opener hooks that they use to peel back your brain, pour in corrosive stomach bile, and then liquefy your brain and then slurp it up. They also have like these membranes between all their thousands of tentacle legs that they're able to use to glide and fly through the air. It is such a fucked up, nasty ass story. Don't read this on an empty stomach. It's a little all over the place. It's just typical creature feature stuff, but the threat is really fun and unique and quite disturbing because you follow a group of government hired exterminators who have to deal with taking down these threats on a daily basis. Kind of Walking Dead-ish fashion kind of style. So yeah, those are all 30 books that I read from the beginning of January all the way to end of February. So yeah, most of my videos, I end up reviewing like 1 or 2 stories. I reviewed 30 books within a span of like less than 50 minutes. So that's a record. That's all I got for today. That's my first reading wrap up. Stay tuned for the next one at the end of March. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. And also, feel free to follow me on Goodreads that I link down below in the comments. And also, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, comment down below if you want to see more horror content from me. Plenty of it on my channel, involving book reviews, movie reviews, stuff like that, and future content to come. That's all I got for today. Deuces.